there's no panic selling. These people, they may have bought at $4, sat through $400, went back to 40, went to 350, back down to 110, and they have not sold. All they've done is bought more. And there's no answer for that. There's no, it is like art of war mastery by a bunch of idiots who should know better. And they're just like, oh yeah, I'll buy more. I don't care. My paycheck came in. I can afford 2 more shares. And you've got maybe 10 million people doing this who now own, probably more than 100 million shares. And eventually, they might own everything.
But yeah, right. Let's do this thing.
Okay.
So, welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today, I am talking to Houston Wade. That's his first name, not the location. He is a geologist, astrophysics professor, a current Harvard grad student in history, and according to his Twitter bio, the owner of a driveway full of shitboxes, all in various states of repair, and the author of the nospheric.geologic.com blog. So welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. This is exciting.
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, yeah. So I first found you having read your GME thread, and then discovered you were far more than just a man tweeting about GameStop. So why don't you give both myself and the people listening like a little background on yourself?
Well, so I have degrees in geography, geology, astrophysics, and space studies. The focus of my background essentially is mission planning for space mining missions in the future. And wow. I teach at Edmonds College in the Seattle area, and I also run a geological exploration company called Noosphere Geologic, where I specialize in precious gemstones.
Wow. So your space planning is going to come in very useful for all of the people who are waiting on the rocket to the moon with GameStop.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, like, where did you first come across this story? Because we'll get into some more of the details. But where did it first cross your radar?
Right before the initial baby squeeze in January, I about 10, 15 years ago, I traded a lot in penny stocks and just kind of was figuring out the system and playing with that. And then, I had to do things with my life and I couldn't spend all day in front of the computer. And so I haven't done much beyond just taking a chunk of my salary and just throwing into mutual funds for a while. But then I read about the impending squeeze that was going to happen with GameStop. And then I was like, oh, this is crazy. I think at the time, the price was at $20 a share. And I thought, oh, well, I could throw some money at it, but, I can't see it squeezing past like $60. I wasn't that in tune to it. And then it shot to 400. All the shenanigans happened with Robinhood and people not being allowed to trade. And then it seemed really squirrely to me. So I started digging deeper and looking at counterfeiting. I'd been aware of counterfeit shares existing, but I didn't realize how diabolical it was. And that these companies were generating hundreds of millions of fake shares to essentially dilute stock into bankruptcy, just make it disappear. And they're incentivized to do that because if they can make the stock go to zero, they don't have to pay taxes on it. So if they can borrow as much as they want and sell it for piles of money, and if they drive that price down to nothing, they don't owe the stock back to their lenders, and they don't pay any capital gains taxes on it. So there's a huge financial incentive to bankrupt 1,000 companies a year in the United States by these shorts. And a lot of it isn't done through legitimate concern that the company isn't going to perform well. The excuse always is shorting is like a regulator on bad performers. But what they're doing is they're taking good companies that employ people and provide products and services, and they're shorting them out of existence and bankrupting them for the simple sake of, I don't have to pay taxes on that, and I get 100% profit. And it's been going on since at least the creation of the electronic exchange in the 70s. But the I don't know if you know about the reg show rules.
I don't think
Essentially,
so.
you're not supposed to short a stock unless you have it physically in hand. But they started naked shorting, selling these stocks that they didn't actually own, and they're supposed to replace that stock within 3 days of selling it. So the idea is, I think the stock price is going to go down. I'll sell it for $100, and I think in 3 days I should be able to find it for 50, and they'll give the person the physical share 3 days later. That kind of changed to you can sell a share you don't own as long as you know where one is. So you're like, well, I'll call up Ted and be like, hey, Ted, do you have 100 shares of this? Yeah. Cool. Click. And then you sell 100 shares you don't own. Well, Ted just got 55 phone calls from 55 different firms all doing exactly the same thing. And so those 100 shares are now promised to dozens of people. And what we're seeing is that these failure to delivers are going through the roof. And generally, when you have lots of failure to delivers like that, is when the stock is on the downside and it's being shorted into nothingness. But with GameStop, is that you're seeing tens of millions of dollars in failure to delivers every single day on a stock that's worth hundreds of dollars, and that is unusual. And the SEC normally doesn't care if the stock is going to zero and there's failure to delivers. Like, who cares? The stock is nothing. They can go on the market and pick it up for pennies. But right now, if you have $50 million in failure to delivers in a day, that starts to be a big deal every single day.
So you've actually answered my next question for me, which was how do we end up with short interest over 100%? But like, it feels like I was watching that documentary, the Wall Street Conspiracy, to try and get like some background on this while I've been doing a lot of like thinking and research on GME, with the potential to maybe put together a book on it, but I don't know. I'm still figuring out exactly how I would, like, what I would talk about in it, to make it like compelling in a way that wasn't just like boring financial data. But I think I got something going on the community online. But like it sounds when you talk about the amount of companies that are just being sort of shorted, 1,000 companies a year are just being shorted out of existence. It feels like banks have found, or not even banks, like financial institutions have found this free money glitch in the system that they are all laughing at us for suggesting we found by buying GME stock.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. But you said that it doesn't matter when failure to delivers are happening on a stock that's worth pennies. Why is that more of a problem on a stock that's worth a few $100s a share?
Well, so the initial short happens when a short position hedge fund borrows shares from a long position fund. So right now, let's say BlackRock, big giant institution, they own 9 million shares of GameStop. And so Citadel comes in like, hey, I want to borrow your shares. And BlackRock's like, well, his shares are sitting here doing nothing. So they lend them to Citadel, knowing full well Citadel's going to short them. But in the meantime, Citadel will owe BlackRock interest every single day, cash interest every day, compounded daily, plus whatever dividends are awarded to BlackRock while those shares are borrowed. And Citadel sells it, and then their goal is that price will drop, and eventually they'll jump in, buy it for pennies, and then return those shares to BlackRock, unless it goes to zero, and then Citadel doesn't owe anything. When that stock is driving down, a year ago, the stock was $2.50 a share, something just absolutely paltry like that. And, if you have several 100,000 shares that are failure to deliver at $2, who cares? That's chump change to these guys. The BlackRock doesn't care because they know that Citadel's good for finding a couple $100,000 in shares. It's when those failure to delivers are in the tens of millions, and I think during the baby squeeze, it hit almost $400 million a day in failure to delivers. And that's when, that stuff adds up. And a big firm that lent out their shares like BlackRock might be like, ooh, they might not be able to find the shares to pay us back. And when those failure to delivers get to a certain point that it starts to outweigh the leverage that they have, that's when the margin calls can happen, and these short hedge funds can be forced to liquidate their positions and buy nothing but, say GameStop in the situation. And that's the squeeze that everyone is pushing for. Is that if you look at the numbers, these short hedge funds have over leveraged themselves to the tune of probably trillions of dollars at this point. And not just in GameStop, but in hundreds of stocks across the market, plus the bond market. They're shorting, the U.S. Treasuries right now like crazy. The 10-year T-note is shorted so much that sometimes someone will pay you to take it. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, if a company like Citadel only has short positions and no long positions, what ends up getting sold is the shorts. It will drive the entire economy into the ground the minute Citadel gets their margin called on them. And I think a lot of big players in the market recognize that, months from now, Citadel won't exist anymore. It'll be another Bear Stearns or Lehman Brothers, just vanish, and whatever assets they have will get scooped up by probably a big investment bank or one of their market maker competitors.
Now you keep using the phrase "baby squeeze," which is exciting.
I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like a stock going up from $4 to $400 is not normally called a baby squeeze.
Yeah.
But we do not live in normal times anymore in basically any facet of reality. But why do you think that this is not over? Because for example, even websites that are set up have been set up by people who have been following the story, like isthesqueezesquoze.com.
Yeah.
It's saying that short interest is at 20%. And perhaps that could cause a small squeeze, dependent on how much of the float was available, how much was being lent out. There's a whole bunch of factors here. But why do you think that this isn't over? Like, what makes you say that we have only seen the baby squeeze thus far?
Well, it comes down to the two main things, which is claimed ownership and how many counterfeit shares exist. So right now, the claimed ownership for institutions is around 200%. So that means institutions think they own, say, 140 million shares, but there's only 70 million shares of existence. And of those 70 million shares in existence, 25 million are owned by insiders and can't really be traded without, filing with the SEC. So there should be 45 million shares that bounce around between retailers and institutions. So why do the institutions think they own 140 million, right? And we have no idea how many the retailers own. The retailers, if I were to estimate, I would say retailers probably claim to own over 100 million. And how institutions get such a large ownership comes from first synthetic shares, which are generated when they lend out their shares. So BlackRock lends 1 million shares to Citadel, Citadel sells 1 million shares, and I buy 1 million of them, right? So when the time comes and the SEC asks who owns shares, I claim I own 1 million, and BlackRock claims they own 1 million because they do. They lent them out. So right now, all of a sudden, there's 2 million shares trading when there should be 1 million. What can also happen is BlackRock lends 1 million shares to Citadel, Citadel sells 1 million shares, and BlackRock buys them again. So now BlackRock owns 2 million shares when there should only be 1 million. And then BlackRock lends them to Citadel again, Citadel sells them, and BlackRock buys them again. So now BlackRock claims to own 3 million shares. And I think this has gone on and on and on. And so you look at retail holdings, and BlackRock claims they own 9 million shares, Fidelity claims they own, say, 6 million shares, and so on. Through all these mutual funds, ETFs, pension funds, and other long hedges, hundreds of millions of shares are claimed to be owned when they aren't. Most of those are IOUs. And then on the retail side, we might be buying tons of these counterfeit shares. And the shorts, for years, were trying to short GameStop out of existence, and we know from history that they'll generate counterfeit shares and don't care about the failure to deliver, and so those accrue and accrue and accrue. And those counterfeit shares are treated just like real physical shares, and so if say a counterfeit share is supposed to receive a dividend, it's cheaper for the hedge fund sometimes to just cut a check and give you that money than it is to try and find the share on the market so you get the legitimate dividend. Because right now, it's $200 for that share. If there's a dividend of $1, it's cheaper to just write a check for that dollar. And so if you look at, if you are curious if you own a real share or not, you can look at your statement from your brokerage when your dividends come around, and sometimes it will say, dividend payment, and sometimes it will say something like payment in lieu of, which is the short hedge fund essentially just cutting a check to cover that dividend cost because it's cheaper than trying to find your stock. And so, in my Twitter thread, my original estimate was 200 to 500 million shares being traded, 200 million on the low end, 500 million on the high end. And the research coming out from people makes me think that I was pretty conservative, that it might be a lot more than that. There's lots of numbers that are coming around to 900 to 1200% ownership. People are claiming ownership. So, that's 640 million to 840 million shares being traded. And if you look at the over-the-counter market, the OTC market, which is kind of the dark pool, it's generally for stocks that aren't listed on major indexes. But there are days where 1 billion shares of GameStop trade outside the market. And are those legitimate shares? How can 1 billion shares trade when there's only supposed to be 45 million of them? Theoretically, yeah, one share can trade back and forth an infinite number of times and make that volume look huge. But someone still has to input that data and make those trades happen. So I personally think that the volume being shown with GameStop being traded is mostly counterfeit shares that should not exist going back and forth.
This is something that's come up a lot, and I've been really trying to get my head around what happens here, because I want to get into just how counterfeited the entire market might be in a little bit, but just to focus on GameStop here for a second. So you're saying that there's suggestions that up to 840 million shares might be floating around. Most of those 800 million, maybe a little less, if that is the case, will be synthetic and counterfeit. What happens here? Do you know that? I'm just really confused as to where this goes. What happens when there's a stock recall, or there is or what happens to a retail investor if he's just sat there and he's got his share that just is completely synthetic? Is that guaranteed as a real asset? Is it technically legal for them to even be able to do this and flood the market with these counterfeit shares? What happens here?
The legality all comes down to whether the rules are ever enforced, right? So you can make as many rules as you want, but if there's no teeth behind them, what's the point?
Wow.
If you never have a traffic cop hiding behind a billboard to catch speeders, you can go as fast as you want whenever you want, right? So if these companies get caught counterfeiting all these shares, well, the fine might be $200. Who cares? If you made $1 billion, I'll pay whatever fine you want. The number of times that Citadel's been caught doing sketchy illegal things in the past couple of years is dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and they've made billions in the process and paid a few $1 million in fines. It's just the cost of doing business for them. And but as far as the retailers go, those counterfeit shares, they're treated just like real shares. They're basically an IOU. So you bought an IOU that trades just like any share of stock would. The difference is that yours isn't the actual stock certificate. It's this thing that says Citadel owes me a share. And the only way Citadel can clear that is to either find a physical share and replace that counterfeit, or buy it back from you and it erases from existence, right? And that's that mother of all squeeze that everyone's talking about, the MOASS, mother of all short squeezes, is Citadel being forced to close all those counterfeits that they generated and all the synthetics that they owe to the firms they borrowed from. And they're trying to draw it out as long as possible. And their goal is, I think, to either get people to become bored and just sell their position and forget about it, or to just stay their execution, I guess, live another day. But in the process, they've generated more counterfeits and they've borrowed more shares in the meantime, trying to get the price down. And all they've done is just dug a hole deeper. The apes, as they call themselves on Reddit, they don't behave in a rational market. They, when the price goes up, you sell. When the price goes down, you panic and you sell. All they do is they buy and hold, and they are not obeying these normal market rules. And so the shorts, they'll do a ladder attack and they'll sell 5 million shares in a matter of minutes, and the price will drive down 20%. All the retail investors do is they go, cool, and they buy it all up. And they have more shares all of a sudden, and it goes right back to where it was. And these hedge funds are pulling their hair out because there's no panic selling. These people, they may have bought at $4, sat through $400, went back to 40, went to 350, back down to 110, and they have not sold. All they've done is bought more, and there's no answer for that. There's no, it is like art of war mastery by a bunch of idiots who should know better. And they're just like, oh yeah, I'll buy more. I don't care. My paycheck came in. I can afford 2 more shares. And you've got maybe 10 million people doing this who now own, probably more than 100 million shares. And eventually, they might own everything. If they keep taking whatever's being offered, there might not be anything left except synthetics in the big funds accounts, and all the shares in existence, all the counterfeits and otherwise, might physically be in the accounts of all these retailers. And then what? Like, if there's nothing left to lend, and all the retailers hold all the shares and they refuse to sell, that's when Citadel is screwed, because Citadel can't say, hey, I've got 100 shares I can get from this guy over here, because that guy doesn't have any more shares anymore. He lent them out months ago and has never gotten them back. So it's how it's going to unfold, I honestly don't know, but I think it's going to be such a shit show that we're going to see all sorts of laws passed by Congress to make sure something like this never happens again. Because the minute GameStop isn't the only thing that Citadel shorted. Citadel shorted BlackBerry, Rocket Mortgage, AMC Theaters, and probably 50 or 100 other companies. And if GameStop, with its 840 million counterfeit shares out there, all of a sudden gets margin called, right? That's, if you think about it, market cap wise, the market capitalization is how many shares in existence times the price of share. Well, if you go to Google Finance, it says, there's 70 million shares in existence. It's $200 a share. That's, 14 billion is our market capitalization. Well, 800 million are trading, which means the market cap might be close to, 200 billion. And that's not being taken into consideration as far as Citadel's margin is concerned. So when this margin gets called, and they're forced to buy all the shares back, they have to buy 200 billion, which is half of their entire portfolio, right? But the minute
that's only at the current price,
exactly, and then once that squeeze happens, demand goes through the roof, and that they're going to be bankrupt. There's no way Citadel can survive, and the minute they get margin called, they flood the market with whatever long positions they have, which doesn't really seem to be anything. They seem to only have shorts and puts and calls based on these shorts. And that means they're going to get margin called on AMC. They're going to get margin called on BlackBerry. They're going to get margin called on Bed Bath & Beyond. They're going to get margin called on whatever else that they owned. And so there could be some old couple in Kentucky who have 1 million shares that are worth a penny in some unknown company and wake up to find $1 million in their account one day because, 5 years ago, Citadel shorted a lawnmower company in Kentucky. So, who, how this chain reacts down the line is going to be on the order of 2008 in the mortgage backed securities, and when the entire market was being driven by these essentially hollow mortgages. Right now, we've got hollow stocks everywhere that are driving the profit incentive for all these big firms.
Yeah, I mean it's utterly insane, and you I've got a couple of lottery tickets in like a few shares of AMC and GME and BlackBerry, because why the fuck
why not?
Yeah, exactly. But the way you describe the Wall Street's bets people is amazing. You're just like, they're just idiots. Like they're not behaving rationally in a market, and that's exactly what it is. I saw this amazing comment because I've been just trawling through posts for weeks, like finding like comments and trying to assemble like how paranoid I think they are with the shills that are on the Discord, on Reddit, and so I come across some comments that are just gold, and I found one that said, the hedge funds have clearly underestimated a group of people raised on Friday night World of Warcraft raids, which is brilliant. But so, Citadel is potentially just gone in a few months. So when they get margin called, as we're suggesting, is quite possible, then they will liquidate everything they have in attempt to buy it. I think they're required to by law, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, it's not them that does liquidation. It's the broker who they trade through.
Okay.
So the broker basically says, all right, you've been margin called by our lenders. By law, I have to liquidate what you have and buy for you to close out these positions. I mean, if you had a Robinhood account on margin and you made a terrible bet, Robinhood just liquidates what you have and pays themselves, because they're like, screw you, you're an idiot. I'm going to take what you have because I want my money back. The same thing happens to, Citadel in this case, or Melvin, or whoever else has shorted Susquehanna. And they go until that all their assets are to zero. And once those assets go to zero and there's still money owed, that's when the insurance kicks in. And the insurance is through generally through the Clearinghouse. So the Clearinghouse now has to use their substantial $67 trillion insurance policy to now balance these books. And the trading computers at the Clearinghouse, they don't care about price. They just need to balance the books. And so what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, who has prices listed in they're for sale? Okay, there's $1 million for sale at $1,000 a share. Buy all those. Okay, now there's $2 million at $1,000.01. Buy all those. Now there's $500,000 at $1,000.03. Buy all those. And they're just going to work their way up until they clear out those 840 million shares that they need to balance the books. And I fully believe that there might be some weird, nanosecond where the only share available is some guy who put it for $420 million, and he sells 3 shares at that price just ridiculously, because that instant is the only moment there's a share listed available, and that will be the absolute king peak of the squeeze. Will be some guy who just put a joke price in to see if it would happen, and that
guy better throw a party for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. and the trading computers at the Clearinghouse has to go until those books are balanced. Like, the squeeze will not be over until everyone finally gets what they're owed. And this is such a tightly wound knot. I mean, I was trying to use the analogy the other day of this is like if you took sewing thread and you had a knot the size of a house and you had to undo it, right? And because you might have your BlackRock that has their 9 million shares, but they're all synthetic. And so, Citadel gets margin called, finds 1 million shares, gives to BlackRock. Well, they still owe BlackRock 8 million shares. And so Citadel's like, I need more shares. BlackRock's like, I've got some I can sell you. So they sell those shares to Citadel. Citadel goes right back. I got some shares to sell you. And it just goes, it goes back again like that. And the dog's now coming to visit. So, this to unravel what everyone is owed, because, also these counterfeit shares have been bouncing back and forth. I buy a share, I sell it. Someone else buys it, sells it. So they have to unravel the chain of custody for those shares, oftentimes to figure out who owes what. And it could take days or weeks for this squeeze to actually play out. So you might see peaks and valleys for 10, 15 days as it goes along, as different margins get called for different short sellers. The thing is that I think you want to be the first one called. You don't want to be the 15th margin call, because by then the price is going to be just stupid. And the numbers that people throw out there just seem brain breaking. A month ago it was $100,000 a share will probably be, the floor. Now people are like, no, $10 million a share. And I honestly don't know.
Every week it seems to get higher.
Because I do think that someone or someones will be able to sell their shares for just prices that seem incomprehensible, because supply and demand. One of the first things they teach you in finance school is that a short position has infinite risk. So the risk for me is I didn't get to go on a vacation this year because of the pandemic, so I put my vacation money into GameStop. Like, if I lose my $1,000, who gives a shit? I'm right back where I was doing what I was doing. But my reward is $100,000 a share, and I get to retire and never do anything for anyone ever again. Cool. I can wait. I've got all the time in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point. It's like, I mean, like my friend and I are sitting around being like, this is boring. I want to be rich already.
Exactly.
But like, yeah, for us, it's just like, like the few hundred, pound or whatever that we have in is just not, it's not that important to us.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know, a few hours, a few days work.
Exactly.
But the thing that the mind blowing numbers that get thrown around, like even just the idea that the DTCC is insured for $67 trillion, right? Like even just that figure alone blows my mind, because the world economy is $130 trillion.
Yeah.
Do you really think it's an actual possibility that, because as far as I'm aware, now you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the DTCC, their like insurance policy is essentially the Fed printing money, right? Yep. Is that pretty accurate? Okay.
Well, they have investments. They have low risk investments. So they take dues from their members, from people who clear their books through their clearinghouse. So they take dues from them and they invest that into low risk stocks and bonds and things. And that's where it's essentially the 67 trillion lies. And if that gets drained, that's when the Federal Reserve has to start spinning up the printers. And the last time that happened essentially was in 2008 when the mortgage market collapsed. And the big insurers, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, AIG, they had trillions of dollars of policies out there, and they're not expecting to have to pay them all at once. That's never, if everyone all of a sudden gets in a car accident tomorrow, your insurance company's going bankrupt. They're not designed for every car in the world to all of a sudden bonk into each other and need a frame job. And so the insurance that exists isn't expecting that 100 different meme stocks are all of a sudden get margin called, and they're going to owe trillions upon trillions upon trillions. I mean, if the stock hits $100,000 a share and there's the 45 million physical shares out there, you're looking at $45 trillion, right? But there's 800 million shares that could possibly exist. So I don't see how anyone gets out of this without the Federal Reserve printing money to cover all. They're required by law to do this, because if they don't print the money, the banks dry up. If the banks dry up, no one has any money in their savings accounts, and the FDIC and the federal insurance all of a sudden gets drained, and you don't have people getting car loans. No one can get credit cards. No one can get small business loans, and the entire world economy just grinds to a halt. So they have no choice but to print. So essentially, I think of my GameStop stock as just being like a federally backed security. That, it might as well just be a currency at this point. It's
safest
I think
lottery ticket ever.
Exactly. It's I think about the price of Bitcoin, and there's 20 million Bitcoins in existence. Why is it worth $50,000? It doesn't produce a dividend. It doesn't produce goods or services. It's just this digital thing that can be erased by a solar mass ejection. And whereas my GameStop stock it's just as rare. It actually produces something, and it's in demand and being held on to just as tightly as someone would a bag of gold. And why not invest the cost of an airline ticket into it?
This is not financial advice.
This is not financial advice. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I just always like to clarify the situation. But I still, part of my brain just goes, this isn't possible. The SEC will step in, the government will step in, the brokers will refuse to pay. There's suggestions that eToro have said, people have read the terms and conditions of retail brokers eToro, where they've said, we reserve the right to just cancel all trades, regardless of when they happened, if we want. And people are just I'm just waiting. I'm waiting to get screwed over. Basically, I'm waiting to have done the understanding of the rules, and to have done my homework and understood what's going on here, and made a vaguely educated guess that this is probably going to go up. Yeah. And then just be told, well, if it was a hedge fund doing this, they'd get their money, but no, you're not getting it.
That's I think a big concern with a lot of people. What we have going for us is, one, there's a lot of international investors invested into this right now. A lot of retail investors, a lot of big firms are internationally invested into GameStop. And if the U.S. government does something shady where they shut down trading or broker some sort of settlement or something, it will cause a lot of the globe to lose faith in the U.S. markets. And after the shady stuff that happened in 2008, I don't think we can crash the global economy a second time and only let those bad performers be the ones that get away with it. And the other benefit I think the long side has is that there are big wealthy funds that are on the side of GameStop, and they want their money. They don't only want their money, they want to see Citadel die. And I don't know if you saw any of the hearings, the congressional hearings they've done over the last couple of months, but one of the interesting ones on the 17th was they spent several minutes basically at the multiple firms testifying. They're like, yeah, Citadel can die tomorrow. We can take up their slack. They're basically saying, let them die. We can take over. And in 2008, they had the meeting of the five, or I should say, I think it was actually three investment banks. There were five at the time. There was J.P. Morgan, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, and Bear Stearns. And Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers weren't invited. The other ones got together. They're like, hey, SEC and FTC, let them die. We can take over. And like, this is how they are so up shit creek that there's nothing you can do to save them. So let them die. We'll gobble up their assets for pennies on the dollar, and we'll just jettison the garbage. And the government, the Federal Reserve and the government were like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And I think that they're probably looking at the books right now. They're probably saying there's no way Citadel can make it out of this. And there's probably strategy meetings happening between some big firms and big investment banks about, letting them die. And I do think it's interesting that we're seeing lots of margin calls happening this week from international brokerages and investment banks, and not so much from the U.S. because I think the international ones are a little smarter than the Americans are. Americans are like, well, they say the check is in the mail. And the national ones were like, get the hell out now while you can. And so they're, I think it was Futu in Hong Kong has announced that they got margin called or are going to get margin called based on their GameStop position. And, they're probably the smart ones. They're like, get out now while the price is $200 a share. Then, after the 15th one has been called and the price is $50,000 a share.
Yeah. I still can't quite believe that these numbers are real. Do you get that sometimes?
Oh yeah. It doesn't seem possible.
Yeah,
but
you don't think that these hedge funds, with all their analysts and all their institutional clout and all their historic knowledge, could be that stupid? Basically,
they're finance bros. Finance bros are like the dumbest people in the entire world. They're so stupid. They'll hire someone like me. They'll hire an astrophysicist or a mathematician to run numbers for them, and then they'll just ignore it. They don't pay attention to the smart people. They have the smart people program their trading computers and do all that stuff. But then it comes down to Chet Chadsworth the fourth, who's fourth generation business bro from Greenwich, Connecticut, who all he wants to do is play lacrosse and mac on high school girls, and all he cares about is getting his money now, and they don't think long term at all. If they thought long term, the mortgage crisis never would have happened. They want what they want now, and they just assume the system will take care of them later. And the amount that Citadel and their compatriots have shorted everything, there's no way they survive this. There just isn't. And they're betting on everything to die. And, Amazon's still going to exist. Microsoft's still going to exist. Walmart is still going to exist. So you can't bet on everything to die. It's someone's going to have to die, and it sure as heck isn't going to be the people who actually make things.
Yeah, I mean that's an Elon Musk thing. He was on, I can't remember what the interview was, but he was just like, look, if you don't make things, there are no things.
Exactly. Yeah.
It seems like a really stupid point, but it's true. As much as this is a lot of speculation, these companies, a lot of these companies are actually based on legit, they're providing a product or a service or a combination of both. And this is probably why they got caught out on GameStop in the first place, is because they underestimated the business. They thought it was done, and Roaring Kitty, Deep Fucking Value, was just like, well, in the video he put up in August of last year, he's almost definitely going to be held up as the Nostradamus of our generation.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But he was just like, look, they're underestimating the fundamentals. The company is solid. They have a lot of stores. They have there's a monstrous gaming industry, and people still want physical discs. And these people have underestimated it. And it's funny you describe them as finance bros. You said the two guys in The Big Short, where Mark Baum's character, they go to the bank and they're like, yeah, so what are you doing when you're giving out these loans? And the guys are they're just like, yeah, we're just handing out ninja loans, no job, no income.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't care. They got their cut. They're done.
Yeah. It's like, why are they confessing? And it's like, no, they're bragging.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like, hey, look what I can do. I can give this loan to this guy and I sell it to these assholes, and I'm out. Yeah. And that's, who, if you're the one who gets out, who cares what happens down the line? And you know, speaking of like the fundamentals, you know, GameStop, $5-6 billion in sales a year, right? A couple $100 million profit. Why on earth last May could you buy the entire company for $200 million? Right? Chewy makes $6 billion in sales, and it'll cost you $50 billion to buy the entire company. You know, there's weird things that where market fundamentals are not in play when it comes to these shorts. And even with regular stocks, you know, as a geologist, I think about this company called Materion. Materion controls an entire square of the elemental table. They own all the beryllium in the world. You cannot get beryllium without going through Materion. Their mine in Delta, Utah has $150 billion in beryllium in it. It's the only place in the world you can get it. Why can you buy the entire company for $1 billion? They can charge whatever they want for beryllium because it has to go into everything. It has to go into the wiring of your car, otherwise the copper rusts. It makes your steel harden. It makes stainless steel. It's used in everything. Why is this company that controls $150 billion in assets worth only $1 billion? It doesn't make any sense, right? Because market fundamentals are not in play for most stocks. Why is, you know, Amazon worth $1,500 a share if they only give like $1 in dividend? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Either Phillips 66 will give you $1 in dividend, and stock costs $90, right? So these fundamentals that everyone touts and champions are never at play. If fundamentals were a thing, why on earth would people be even buying Bitcoin? Like, the entire point of Bitcoin was that you can make, you know, secret transactions that no one can follow. Well, that doesn't work anymore. They can trace exactly where the money's going with Bitcoin. And if the entire purpose of Bitcoin is to pay criminals to do crime, like, that's not a really sound investment portfolio to
I mean, there's always going to be criminals and crime.
Exactly. I mean, speculation is what drives the price of almost everything. You know, speculation is what drives the housing market. Speculation is what drives the oil market. Speculation is what drives various stocks. And, you know, so we can't always look at fundamentals as a reason why the performance of a certain stock performs a certain way, because it's all fads. People, you know, they all wore bell bottoms 40 years ago, and they don't today. Like, if you had bell bottom stock in 1978, you're a god. But if you had bell bottom stock in 1985, you're destitute, right? So these you know, the boomers that cry about fundamentals have no idea what's actually driving the market. The market's driven by, you know, supply and demand, and why people demand things are basically monkey see, monkey do. They're, you know, most people buying GameStop have no idea what's going on. They just know that their friend who's smarter than them told them to buy GameStop, and that's it. They're like, cool.
That's pretty much how I got in. Like, I did the research afterwards, but my friend that's smarter than me told me about it, and I was like, okay, let's have a look.
I have hundreds of people a day asking me, like, is the squeeze going to happen? Like, I have no idea. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Like, I don't know. It'll happen when it happens. And when it happens, we'll have days to discuss it. But it's not could be like it's going to squeeze in 40 minutes and then be over. It's, you know, and the other message would be like, well, hit 193 today. Should I sell? I'm like, do your thing. I'm not selling until it's at least $100,000 a share, because that's the only way it makes it worthwhile to me. Is that, you know, I can put more shit boxes in my driveway.
Oh, that feels like a fantastic place to wrap things up there, man. We have shot through nearly an hour already. That was I would love to keep talking about it, because I could talk about this all day, but I have another podcast to do in like 5 minutes. So I am going to say farewell. Thank you very much. I really hope I can get you back on at some point in order to talk about your like actual work with your, you know, space mining, space planning stuff. Heck yeah. That sounds super cool. So yeah, everyone follow Houston Wade. He is at the Houston Wade on Twitter. Check out his stuff, and don't listen to anything we've said. It's not financial advice.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
No problem. Thanks very much, man.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.